Welcome to our next In Conversation With. And today I'm really happy to be in conversation with Matt Kahl from Dan Murphy's. Hey, Matt.
Hey Zoe, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for joining us to chat about this theme of connection and collaboration in this new hybrid work world, but kind of actually in the office space. I reached out to have a chat because we know that generally speaking that the importance of connection for people to feel at work when it comes to creating that sense of belonging, their overall well-being, engagement, retention, all the good things that we want to see in the workplace, and as well as collaboration from a very practical point of view of getting things done, doing things better, two really important themes. And we know that post COVID, that's kind of being flipped on its head a little bit, and where and how that connection and collaboration happens has changed a lot. And that, yeah, a lot of workplaces, there's been variety of responses: return to office mandates, optional, choose your own adventure. But whichever way organizations have gone, that where and that what and how that connection collaboration has changed a little bit. And I know that in your role, you've done someone who's done a fair bit of thinking about office spaces and how they can really promote that over time. So I thought you'd be a great person to chat with and share your experience. So I don't know, maybe you wanted to actually introduce yourself and your role, and yeah, what's been your kind of work in that space of office spaces.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much, Zoe. So yeah, my name is Matt Kahl. I'm the senior people partner for the Dan Murphy support teams. So I look after most of our capabilities that sit under that banner, but part of the Endeavour Group. And so Endeavour went on a journey over the last couple of years in thinking about post-COVID particularly. What do our workplaces need to look like to enable us to deliver on what our EVP and in the way that we'd like to work? And so I had the opportunity of working on that project. So I was with many other team members in Endeavour and helping thinking about what do our workplaces need to look like. I'm actually sitting in the office that we launched back in November last year, our first new master plan Endeavour office, which brings together all of the banners that sit underneath Endeavour Group, including BWS, Dan Murphy's, our hotels business, ALH, bringing our teams together in our first purpose-built Endeavour office, which has been super exciting.
Amazing. And that's based in Richmond, correct?
That
Yeah,
is based
Melbourne.
in Richmond.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Nice.
I think Richmond was a key location for us in where thinking about what are the kind of things that our teams look for when the concept of going into an office and making that journey into the workplace. We believe it's a great location. Not only does it connect us with like-minded businesses that are in the area, but it also gives the team access to the amenity that's important to them that we discovered through the workshops that we ran to understand what is important to them. So we can deliver a location and a space that's fit for purpose.
Nice. And how has been Endeavour's approach to that question of return to office post COVID?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. So Endeavour, we're fortunate at Endeavour to have a flexible approach to working. So our teams can choose the way in which they'd like to work. So there are some team members that choose to come into the office 5 days a week. There are others equally who choose to work from home 5 days a week or come in purposefully to the office at the times that they need to. And I think our realization was post-COVID that our spaces in the offices that we had in Victoria weren't necessarily conducive to delivering on sort of that aspiration of flexible work. We had offices that were very desk-based. In some of our offices, people still had their fixed desks. In others, it was choose a desk when you arrive on the day, but they were very much founded on people sitting at a desk all day and didn't really dial up the elements that we knew that our teams were looking for post-COVID when coming back to work. Which notably were how do we socialize together and how do we connect as teams? Might not necessarily all about the work that we do, but how do we come together to do that work? And so we started exploring the concept of, well, what does a space look like if our teams are looking to do that kind of work together? And we quickly learned that the spaces that we had didn't fit the bill, so we had to think about doing it differently.
Nice. And you mentioned there, that the workshops and kind of that co-design approach that you had with team to figure out what was being important. I don't know if you could give us some of the highlights of
Yeah,
what that looked like.
sure. So we worked with obviously some great external partners, some design partners, and some build partners to help us bring the space to life. But we're also fortunate in that within Endeavour we have teams that design our stores. that think about what our customer journeys look like in those stores. And so we were fortunate to be able to deploy that capability into the project team.
Nice.
And so we really did sort of take a human-centered design around the approach we did with our office. So we interviewed our teams to understand, both from a functional perspective, what do the functions that exist within Endeavour need to be able to work in a new space, to make sure that we were tailoring it and that we could deliver the functional requirements. But also we created personas and archetypes of the kind of ways in which people would work in the office. So we could really sort of map, for those that want to be in the office 5 days a week, what does that journey look like for them? For those who, after more social occasions in coming into the office, what might that journey look like for them? And really working with a group of team members to help us co-design really the principles that set out the space. And so, yeah, we went on that journey for many months in terms of really getting an understanding is what is important to the team, what do they need, what are they missing in our offices now, but also if we could reimagine what our offices look like, what would be the things that are important to them to make sure that we can deliver a fit for purpose space. Yeah, and that's the brief that went to our internal and of course our design partners.
Nice. And it sounds like a pretty comprehensive process, but I don't know what would you say were the kind of those top underlying principles or needs that you're trying to meet through the
Yes.
design?
So there was design elements that we're really trying to meet in terms of how do we want the space to feel. So I think that you want a space that connects the team to the culture of the business, and I think that was a really important. The more that we learned from the team about what it is that we're looking for, they wanted to come into a space that didn't just feel like they were walking into any office. They wanted to walk into a space that made them feel like they were working for Endeavour Group. And we're pretty lucky in the business that we're in, in terms of the work that our teams do across our hotels and our drinks businesses and our specialty businesses. And our purpose is creating a more sociable future. So we're all about socialization as a brand. And so from a feeling perspective, we really did focus on sort of like 5 key pillars, which was around how do we create energy when people come into the space. We're quite a humble business, so humility needed to be important. So nothing showy or fancy. It needed to reflect who we were. And also the down-to-earth nature of our business too. We want it to be an inclusive space, and we want it to be a space that drove connection. So they were the key sort of overarching sort of feeling pillars. And then we also wanted to be a space where people could work together, they could learn together, and they could connect and celebrate together. A space that helped us bring our purpose to life of creating a more sociable future. How do you have a space that enables us to have our teams socialize, connect? Yes, of course, there's work that needs to be done, but we also want our teams to meet from other businesses and to find spaces where that they enjoy being together.
Yeah, nice. No, and it's such a, as you said, a great opportunity for that reflection of, how do we bring that purpose? How do we bring often, the values or the purpose are just a poster on the wall, but how do you actually bring it to life through the way that the spaces are designed, and imagine that experience for people in the space. And I don't know, what examples could you share about, what that looks like? How did that kind of get 3D, I guess?
Yeah. Well, there were 3 sort of core design needs that then came out of the space that we needed to deliver on. And in fact, we've learned a lot since we've opened around how our teams are using those spaces. And so, if we think about where did we land in terms of the footprint and the feeling of our space, connection and collaboration were the 2 core primary purposes of the space that we built. And the third need was around concentration. So how do our teams come into the space to connect? How do they come in to collaborate with one another? And then how do they come in and do deep concentration work if that's what they needed to do? And so we've learned a lot about those spaces. So across our footprint, we've got those zones all the way across the office, but they're anchored by our purpose of being creating a more sociable future. We're anchored by the social space. So that's the heart of our office. Interestingly, we've learned a lot of data points as we've opened up. In fact, more team members are using the space than we expected to, because they have responded well to what's been created for them, of course, because they have the opportunity of inputting into the space. that they wanted. And so we are finding that, yeah, definitely the teams are coming in to collaborate and connect, but more team members are coming in than we expected to do deep
Mm.
concentration work.
Mm.
So which is great. So we've had really high utilization of the space, yeah, it's been so far it's been a great success, albeit there's many learnings that we're focused
Mm.
on that we need to iterate consistently.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And what would be some of those kind of key learnings that you take into the next
Yeah.
uh projects?
Yeah, one of the so there are many, and in fact, we recently concluded our first ever so our inaugural workplace survey. So
Mm.
part of our listening strategy with the team is how do we make sure that we're always iterating with space,
Mm.
and that it is fit for purpose. I think particularly for sort of corporate teams. From an EVP perspective, the space in which you work is a really important lever that
Mm.
helps someone feel connected to the business, that is important to them in terms of where they can come to work. Um, and so, from a success perspective, we've certainly seen that the team has valued that space to come from a connection and collaboration perspective. They've loved our enhancement in technology that we've put into the space to make sure that we can work in a hybrid way. We know that
Mm.
not all of our teams are choosing to come into the space, and so we needed to make sure the space was equipped for hybrid. Of course, our location, our accessibility, and these kind of features, the modern features that we've got in the workplace. But equally, on the other side, there are some areas that we're still improving on the outside, like concentration workstations.
Mm.
More people are coming in than we expected, so the
Mm.
ratio we may not have got right, and some areas to do more deep work. If team members are choosing to come in to do deep work, we've got an opportunity to relook at that. We're
Mm.
also learning more that our teams, because of our hybrid and flexible work, more of our teams are wanting to do smaller meetings. So
Mm.
rather than sort of larger group meetings, there's a lot of 2-on-1 or 1-on-1 meetings. And whilst we tailored that for the space, we've realised that some of those spaces we might be in short supply of. So
Mm.
sort of we're looking at the moment on what we might need to do to address that, and
Mm.
using these learnings to think about what our next workplace looks like
Mm.
in our which will be our Sydney office.
Amazing. Yeah, no, and it's I think it's such a it's a really interesting sign, right? That, there was that. And what's one thing that I've really, appreciated in the work that we've done together is that, that freedom and that option of, there was no return to office mandate. There was no, kind of working where it works best for you. But and despite that, that kind of over subscription, if you like, to or just that really strong interest in people wanting to come in and use the space shows that when it is designed intentionally, when it is designed with people's input, how it can, yeah, really be something people want to go to rather than have that forced nature.
Yeah. I think there's two really important levers, Zoe, that we did pull down on to be able to help encourage team to experience the office.
Mm.
Because whilst we certainly have a flexible policy and teams can choose where they work to be able to get their work done, we certainly did want to, in thinking about a one Endeavour community and bringing together all of
Mm.
our brands that we've got that work in Endeavour, it was important that we wanted our teams to come and use the space. We didn't want to build a new space and no one to come.
Mm.
So there was probably two levers that we pulled down on to really think about that. The first one was our workplace services model. So quite historically in a lot of workplaces, we really focused on the sort of do things work? Is there someone there to fix the
Mm.
tap if the tap stops working, and making sure the lights all work? So very facilities focused, which is critical. You have to
Mm.
have those foundational elements that exist within any workplace. But we've
Mm.
introduced a new role, which other organizations are doing. So we took we looked around to see what others were doing in this space, and we've introduced workplace experience. And I think that
Mm.
through the data that we've got in the months that we've been open has actually proved that there's a direct correlation to our teams that are wanting to come and engage in the space in the experience that we're creating teams to do that. So our workplace experience manager, in fact, they haven't started. They're due to start on the 20th of May, but there's been many team members that have been chipping in and helping create this experience for the team. We've been thinking about what are the key things that drive people to come to the work? How do you create a reason for people
Mm.
to not work in another location or to not work from home that day to experience the space. And so the concept of social activations and these kind of workplace experience has been really integral to that. In fact,
Mm.
I'm in the office today, and at lunchtime today, we've got a paella experience
Mm.
on, and then tied into that, we've also got a Spanish wine producer who's out from Spain. And so we're tying in an
Mm.
opportunity for our teams to come together and have lunch together, but then also discover products together and learn more
Mm,
about the range in which we sell to help our
mm,
customers. So
mm,
like these kind of events and activations,
mm,
we've proven through our utilization data are driving more teams to come in,
mm,
to connect with their teams, and then to stay and enjoy the experiences along the way.
mm. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about the pay, I have to say. And you mentioned a couple of times EVP, and maybe just for our non HR listeners. Yeah, I don't know if you want to tell us what's EVP, and in Endeavor's case, what you're kind of striving to create in that sense.
Yeah, sure. So EVP obviously is our employee value proposition. So it's the experience that we're trying to create for our teams when they work here. They say this is the lived experience that we have. And so we did use the EVP as a lens in which we needed to create the space, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't incongruent with what our office
Mm,
looked like. And when people came into the space, they're like, oh, it just doesn't feel Endeavour. So there's
mm,
really four key levers of our EVP. And the first one is come as you are, which is all about authenticity and a diverse bunch of people that can come together, who can be themselves. Then there's feel the energy. And feel the energy is very much around, we've got amazing products that we sell to customers, and we want people to get behind those products, or whatever it is that they might create also, whether it's wine, whether it's a program, whether it's a platform. We want people to get energized by the work that they do. Of course, dream big. We're a big organization, and we want to create possibilities for our team. And the last one is be able to leave their mark, to create or to innovate and to build sort of a future that helps them with their career, but also obviously helps Endeavour deliver better to customers. So we really
mm,
thought about how do those levers then activate across the space,
mm,
how do we make sure that those things are embedded into what we do.
mm,
So really did go to, again, that feeling element of being humble and being warm and being lighthearted, but then also creating spaces and moments that really delivered on that EVP. And a classic is this concept of feel the energy and what we're doing around workplace experience in
mm,
immersing people in product, and getting them to understand what we're delivering to our customers, building their skill in being able to talk to customers when they're out in stores about those products. So, there's
mm,
definitely a team connection component to it, but it also transcends that. And it means that we can
mm,
improve the customer experience as well.
mm. Amazing. Yeah, great. And I know that a lot of support was, and that you talked about that kind of planning and imagining the workplace experience, once people are in the office, but then also kind of those activations also, looked like support, right? And support and leading up to the doors opening, support for leaders, based in Melbourne as well, in terms of their role in how, because one thing is the architecture and the physical, build, but then there's also, what you do with it, right? Like what happens when people are there, and the role of leaders in that. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to give us some of what were some of those highlights in terms of how you thought about really preparing people to be able to make the
Yeah.
most of the space, to feel comfortable, to make it their own.
Yeah, I think COVID certainly accelerated sort of our ways of working. Moving from quite a to what was probably quite fixed in terms of the way that we thought about work to very flexible and hybrid. And one of the learnings when we thought about this space was, are our leaders equipped to lead in a hybrid way? Do they
Mm,
know what's important to their team in terms of that piece of connection? How do we build connection with each other? How do we help our teams to collaborate together? And so, of course, that's where we got you involved as well in helping us think through that. But I think that was an important lever for us to pull down on. Do our leaders get together with their teams to talk about, well, what does the way that we work, what's important to us? How do we come together in a meaningful and purposeful way? We certainly didn't want to force anyone back into the office, and we wanted to equip our leaders with tools and understanding about, well, how do you go about getting your teams together that they feel like then if they're coming into the space, it's worthwhile and it's valuable for the time, and they're getting good connection, but also getting good work output as well. So our hybrid leader training was an important component of doing that. The other thing is that we obviously designed the space with our team in mind, but we also then use them as our change champions in then rolling out the space. So they supported their relevant functional areas in being immersed in the space before we opened, keeping them updated on what was happening. So they were sort of kept abreast of what we were doing, and then we're able to showcase them through the space and talk to them about what is important in terms of how we need to work in this space, what's different maybe from the way that we've worked before, into the way that we need to work in the future. And some of those examples are no fixed desks anymore, desk booking policy. So people knew when they were coming to the space, they could get the space that they needed. Where we've got our collaboration zone, how do you use them to get the most out of them? So when you are purposefully using the space, rather than maybe the way that we've used our spaces in the past. We called them our go-to gang, so our team could go to them whenever they needed to. And so they're essential not only in helping us think about the space, in helping orient our teams in the space, but they've also been essential in helping provide feedback on behalf of their teams. So we can understand maybe where things aren't working well or changes that we need to make in our approach.
Nice. And and I'm curious, you mentioned you'd done some recent data collection, but even anecdotally, have there been any examples that have stood out to you about practically how you've seen either leaders or teams kind of really take advantage of those two kind of things you talked about, that connection and collaboration in particular?
Yeah, we so like I said, sort of there was that connection and sort of socialization piece was key. The data that we've been taking through our booking tool and also through our building scan data shows us that days where we have very specific activations in the space to bring our teams together, to be able to give them something to do while they're at work other than just necessarily working to connect. Those are always the days that we're busiest. We also have meeting-free days across Endeavour every 3 weeks on a Thursday. And the days where our teams don't have lots of meetings are the days they're also choosing to use and connect in the space. So our utilization has been quite amazing actually across those days where we've created a reason for the team to come in. But more broadly than that, we're finding the space. Particularly our desks on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the busiest. And a lot of people are choosing to work from home on Mondays and also Fridays. And I think Mondays in our type of work, because it's very trade heavy, it's very focused on looking at sales and previous week, and it's very meeting heavy. And so it makes sense that teams choose the right space for them to be able to do those meetings. And on days where their calendar frees up a little bit more and they've got more space to connect and to socialize and collaborate, are the days that then they're choosing to come into the office. We were surprised. One of the major constraints that we foresaw in this space is because we came inner city Richmond, parking is more limited. And so it was concerning to us about that. But we also then chose a location that meant that we had amenities in public transport and to trams. And so we have seen our teams, even though we do have limited parking on site, they're still choosing to find other ways to work versus driving, which has been great. So it hasn't been the barrier in which we anticipated it to be, but we've also needed to make changes to the way that we do our car park booking to try and make it more available, and listening to the team's feedback about that also.
Nice. No, and it's great. I know we talked about in some of that leader preparation, right? That thinking, two of the things that you mentioned, right? First step is finding out from your team, what they need and what's valuable to them in terms of, what would make them want to come to the office, and how do they want to have that connection happening. And then also that idea of the moments that matter, right? So, when someone new's starting, when it's a particular celebration, commemoration, etc., which might be different for each team, obviously not. Correct. Kind of it doesn't rely on the office activation from a everybody point of view, but maybe a more individual team-based
definitely
example.
And I think that's the important part, in that leaders have two hats that they wear. They wear an individual hat first around what's the way that I want to work, and how am I productive, and how am I getting am I meaningful doing my work. But there's also then the second hat that they wear in how am I connecting and making sure my team have got what they need. And so it's really important that we supported our line managers in thinking about those two things concurrently, rather than in isolation. But we have created a space that allows allows our teams to celebrate, to connect, to have fun. We're surrounded by what we call the social square, which is activated also to be an events area as well, because we know that it's important to being creating a sociable future is socializing and connecting together. So there've been some of those key levers that we've pulled down, also complemented by our amazing tasting, which hopefully people see in the video, which is a great space for teams to come together and immerse themselves in product, but to have all those moments of celebration as well.
Yeah, great. And in many ways, as you mentioned, it was kind of the timing was fortuitous with already thinking about office space to some degree, but then COVID happening, and then okay, cool. Now you had that opportunity to start with a blank page, so to speak, blank floor space, and then design from the ground up. I was curious, if people who are listening who maybe think, oh, that's the dream, but we actually already built the office pre-COVID, or we've got a legacy space that how do we think about really improving or adjusting or getting the most out of the space that we have, I guess, right? That they don't have that opportunity to design something from the bottom up. I was curious if you'd have any thoughts or tips for them based on your experience on how they can still get the most out of that space, maybe.
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, we I think our space wasn't also perfect. We actually chose the space that we were moving to before we had the opportunity of doing all of our archetypes and personas. So there are some elements of the space in hindsight that we would have thought about differently had we had done those first. And so whilst our space is definitely fit for purpose, our teams are coming in and they're using it, and we're getting great feedback, on our space. The key thing that I think that teams that have a fixed location is talk to the team and ask them what it is that's important to them. And I think that both aligning to our EVP in understanding what are the aspiration of our space to deliver against our EVP, that's critical. The second piece is speak to the team about what basic improvements can we make to be able to help step us towards that. And, interestingly, even though we've developed a new sort of greenfield site, there is key tips that our team gave us in our recent survey that just helped us make incremental improvements to the space that actually have made a big difference to their experience. And I'll give you one classic example, music. So we had no music in the space, and on our quieter days, the team felt the office was a bit quiet. So implementing music into the office, we've seen overwhelmingly positive feedback to that. And so that change doesn't require to rebuild your office to change the design, but it's a simple sort of amenity piece that really drives the team to feel more positive in the space. So I don't think necessarily it's always a space design piece. It could either be a ways of working piece or a behavioural change, or it could be something sort of in the amenity space that you might be able to consider to help drive a better team experience.
Yeah, great. And like you said, right, so kind of having that, what's our aspiration, what's our employee value proposition, how do we want, bringing in there. And I thought that was really great. You said, there's that functional side, but there's that feeling side, right, which is really important when we're thinking about experience and experience design of any kind. Like, what's the aspiration in terms of how we want people to feel here, and then also kind of combining that, what are they telling us that they need? Like, what are they telling us that given the space that we have, that is a kind of a barrier, or ideas that they might have on tweaking. And I guess kind of that, then there's that middle layer of then the mindset, or I guess the way that people go into it, right, the intention they bring into what they're doing there, and how they make that relevant for them, as you said, individually, but also as a team.
If we look at, with the exception of the space in and of itself, if we look at one of the major changes, or one of the things that's working most well in our space, is with the exception of the workplace experience manager role. Not every organization may be able to invest in a role like that, but our social calendar and our social activations are actually done through our social crew. And it's a group of team members who are passionate about bringing teams together, to giving them experiences, and who, in essence, volunteer their time sort of on the side of their day job that create these experiences. You don't need to think about the space to be able to do that. You don't need to change your furniture, and I think those kind of things have proven to us, even if we were in our old spaces, by activating that lever and by bringing our teams together to think about those kind of workplace experiences, that's a major reason why teams are using our space. It just so happens we've also got a beautiful space, a new space for teams to come to. No doubt
Yeah.
that's playing a part, but irrespective of that, I think that's
Mm.
also something that teams can do without even needing to think about their space.
Mm. Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, and I've, had the pleasure of a quick walkthrough of the space. It definitely is beautiful. But yeah, I look forward to seeing you there again soon.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks for having me.